Iceberg green. That's some cold shit.
Hey, welcome to my podcast, Cold Narratives. I'm your host, Iceberg Green. About to let y'all hear some of these cold narratives. Check it out. So today I'm going to talk about the ghetto, and how it was formed and how it was systematically put there in place, and they redline stuff specifically so they can pretty much keep tabs on where we are and not allow us into different areas, in different communities. They want to pretty much keep tabs on us so they can systematically oppress us, in our communities. They wanted to do this within our community, so we have to pay attention to what's going on around us, not just inside our community, because this is what's creating this problem. So y'all, we got to really pay attention to what's going on in this world. I know y'all got a lot of shit y'all doing, but it's a lot of stuff and policies that are about to be put in place that's going to harm us as black people. So we have to pay attention, y'all. Stay in tune. Okay, so this is Sherelle Cashin. She's an attorney, and this is from The Root. So this is her take on it. Check it out.
Like many songs will tell you,
bullet holes left in my peepholes. Start projects.
the story of what housing and other living conditions look like for many Black Americans is pretty bleak, and that's by design. In addition to artists cataloging their very personal experiences, it's been proven that the modern phenomenon of concentrated Black poverty was an intentional government-sponsored institution. This is in part why President Biden issued an executive order back in January, intended to right the historical wrongs Black folks have faced when it comes to housing and home ownership in this country. But first, let's take it back.
The dawn of the 20th century, African Americans in major cities lived scattered throughout the city. They weren't segregated particularly. It's only with the Great Migration of 6 to 7 million African Americans north and west escaping the South, the predominant response of the United States government and state and local governments to the Great Migration was to contain Black people in their own neighborhoods. And HUD, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, was particularly a part of this role. With the precursors to HUD, introduced and encouraged racially restrictive covenants, redlining of every major city where African Americans landed. The federal government was a sponsor of urban renewal, infamously called Negro removal by the great James Baldwin.
Urban renewal, which means moving the Negroes out. It means Negro removal. That is what it means. And the federal government is an accomplice to this fact.
That so-called urban renewal also included a federally sponsored interstate highway system, which was intentionally designed to mow through vibrant Black neighborhoods. Take Miami, for example, previously called Colored Town during segregation.
The Department of Housing and Urban Development and the federal government writ large in the first 7 decades of the 20th century invested billions of dollars in racial segregation and concentrated poverty. Each time this country created a peculiar institution that subordinated Black people, slavery, Jim Crow, it created and dismantled it. They replaced it with another one. And the iconic Black ghetto, I don't use that as a pejorative, I use it as a descriptor, was a follow-on institution to slavery and Jim Crow. That's the legacy that every new administration inherits, and the Biden administration has as well.
So yeah, I'm sure y'all have heard of HUD, Housing Urban Development, and this is what I say about systematic, and this is all over the United States of America, and like I said, it dates back, from when we did migrate from down south, from all the atrocities that we dealt with down there. So once we got here, they had to pretty much, put a tag on us like they always do and try to keep us in place, know where we are, know what we're doing, how to oppress us economically. And this is an example of it. So you see it clearly on display right here.
After the passage of the Fair Housing Act of 1968, which actually only got passed in the wake of Dr. Martin Luther King's assassination. In 1980, 8 out of 10 Black people would have had to move in order to be evenly integrated within metropolitan areas. Half of Black people who live in metropolitan areas still live in neighborhoods of high segregation. So we've had modest improvement, but segregation persists. And economic segregation has spiked since 1970. The so-called American dream is only working for a relatively small slice of the population that can afford to buy their way into what I call gold standard neighborhoods that have the best of everything. And everybody else struggles, and the Black poor struggle the most.
So what happens now?
Today, I'm directing the Department of Housing and Urban Affairs and Urban Development to redress the historical racism in federal housing policies.
So I'm talking to the women out here, single mothers in particular, and you know, you've dealt with all these different vouchers to try to keep us in certain communities. You know, you notice when you get these vouchers, you ain't going. You're not going to these communities where you're like, man, I don't have to deal with the crime rate. I don't have to deal with impoverishment. I don't have to deal with having to find a good job. I don't have to deal with that. They're not sending you to those communities. They're putting you where all the other oppressed people are. Like I said, man, so we got to pay attention to these narratives and find a way out, man, so we won't be so dependent on the government, because that's what a lot of us have become, you know? So I hear a lot of people talking about how slavery wasn't in California. So this is an example, and I want you to really look at this, because this is in California. This is in Glendale, Southern California. So this is what was going on, sundown towns, and I didn't even know this. So check out this information, man. And I'm telling you, these narratives they're trying to push, man, watch out.
Right? California has a history of so-called sundown towns. These are places where Black people and other minorities were excluded, were at night through laws that were set in the community. Harassment and sometimes violence. One of those cities was Glendale.
The online exhibit with videos and guides details the city's history as a decades-long hub for the American Nazi Party and the Ku Klux Klan. The KKK holding rallies in Glendale as recent as the 1980s. The archives also proving Glendale was one of many sundown towns in California and throughout the nation.
A sundown town is a city or town that is all white on purpose, so uses informal and formal means to keep African Americans and other people of color out of the city.
Though there was no official law on the books, Glendale excluded Black people through informal policies and police intimidation, preventing Black residents from buying property or simply being in the city at nighttime.
We didn't have Jim Crow in California, but we had sundown town laws.
The cities of Burbank and South Pasadena, both former sundown towns, passed similar resolutions after Glendale's move.
All right, so after watching that video, do you feel like that played a major role into where we are as Black people today? And also want to ask a question, if other races were oppressed and put in the same position as Black people, where would they be? You got to think, this is over 400 years of this. So just imagine, put yourself in our shoes as a people and realize the crime that was committed and is still going on against Black people to this day. I want to thank you all for tuning in. I want to say God bless everyone going through the struggle, and watch out for them cold narratives that the government be trying to push on us, y'all. And to all my Black people, I would be nothing without y'all. Thank you all.